Okay. Good evening. And welcome to everyone who's joining us on the internet. Surprise. God did not give you the capacity to think. Again, God did not give you the capacity to think. That's enough to keep you busy for the next week. As consciousness, as conscious awareness, you have the capacity to what? Pay attention. Not think. Thinking is not natural to you. And yet you think that it's not only the most natural thing to you, you think that it is synonymous with being conscious. You think that thinking is your function. My God, if I weren't to think, what would I do? Well, I'll tell you something. In the silence, you would learn a whole lot. Because in the silence, you would be present with things. You would be present with each other. Not shielded against each other by means of your thoughts or your demeaning definitions, or even your loving thoughts and definitions. This is a key point. Now, I want to back up, so to speak, to the beginning. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And God being God, infinitely, was called creation. And God's self-expressions, God's extension of himself, was only like himself. And you are his self-expression. You are what God is expressing himself as right there where you are. God is not expressing you. God is expressing himself right where you are. God presencing himself is what you are. And in the beginning, the sons and daughters of God were innocent, guiltless. And guilt was an unknown word. And not any of the sons or daughters of God had had a single thought. They experienced the bliss, the peaceful, joyous bliss of being consciously aware, infinitely speaking, of all of creation. Because that which was the mind of God was what was presencing itself as what you might call their mind. And so everything that occupied the mind of God occupied the minds of the sons and daughters of God. And being was a matter of the conscious reveling in the awesomeness, the infinite awesomeness of creation. Because all of creation, infinitely speaking, was immediately and simultaneously available to every son and daughter of God to feel and experience and to be loved by. Because, as I've said, love is the substance of being. And so love is the substance of all creation. And if all creation is what constitutes the content of the minds of the sons and daughters of God, then the experience is one of being infinitely loved. And at the same time, being infinitely loving. Now, figuratively speaking, we're going to say that a couple of the sons and daughters of God decided to play a game called Let's Pretend. Let's pretend that we are seafarers, and let's pretend that as we sail the 7 seas, we come across pirates. And we dedicate our lives to eradicating the 7 seas of pirates and the dastardly deeds that they do to poor, innocent human beings. And the father looks at them, participating in this game of Let's Pretend, and thinks nothing of it. And as they play their game, they come across pirates. And they fight with them, and they run them through, and they make a little hash mark on the end of their sword for each one, each dastardly pirate that they've killed. And at the end of the day, they get together and they compare hash marks. I killed 18 pirates. Well, I killed 33. You didn't do quite as good as me. I did the best. Of course, all of this is thinking. Now, here they have gotten really intent upon the game they're playing, really caught up in it. And so the one who only killed 13 feels bad. And the one that killed more feels really good. And so they have a way of measuring themselves and each other. How? By means of thinking. And one is not as good, and one is very good. Thinking is used for comparisons. thinking is used for value judgments. Thinking is used for ascertaining one's value or one's valuelessness. Thinking is used for determining another's value or valuelessness. And what happens? It becomes obvious that in this state of imagination, one has emotions, good, proud feelings, and sad, self-demeaning feelings. And those engaging in these games realize that these emotions are usable. For what purpose? For the purpose of control, for the purpose of manipulation, because thinking amounts to judgment, evaluation that is consummated in judgment. Now, here killing has gone on in the imagination. Assessments of each other have occurred. Valuations and devaluations have occurred. And acts of manipulation have developed between these individuals perceiving themselves to be sailors of the seven seas, the vanquishers of pirates, the do-gooders. But even as the do-gooders, they still can do real well or not so good, and then feel bad or good because of where they stand. And they end up hurting each other by means of their judgments. Now, the Father continues to watch. The Father sees that nothing but imagination is going on. He sees that no one has been killed. And he sees that the sailors of the seven seas, who are feeling good or bad, depending upon which end of the stick they're looking from, are not guilty of anything either, because he knows they're not sailors of the seven seas. And he knows that whatever they're feeling and whatever they think they're doing isn't actually happening except within the context of this imaginative scenario that they have built up and played into. And so there is no judgment from the Father except, these are my beloved sons and daughters, in whom I am well pleased, because they haven't, for a moment, stopped being me expressed. Me expressing. I have not been altered by their imagination. And they, the sons and daughters, my sons and daughters, have not been altered by virtue of their imagination. And so there is still no guilt, no actual guilt. And the Father at no point sees his sons and daughters as guilty. Oh, but they are denying who they are, because they're claiming to be the sailors of the seven seas. And they are ignoring who they really are. And isn't that a slap in the face of God? Isn't that a denial of God? Isn't that an ignoring of their source? Well, if God were to say something, he would say, yes, if they could actually do it, you see. But they can't actually do it, and so it hasn't been done. And regardless of the way they are choosing to perceive themselves at the moment, they are still my beloved sons and daughters, in whom I am well pleased. And so, here you all are, engaged in thinking as you go through your days and weeks. You use thinking to define yourselves. I'm a nurse, I'm a doctor, I'm an anesthesiologist, I'm a yoga teacher, I'm a housewife, I'm a mother. In other words, I am what I think I am. I am the definition I have arrived at by virtue of thinking. But I want you to understand something. We're talking here, we're reading about the guiltlessness of the Son of God. And we're talking about each of you being right now the Christ, the son or daughter of God. Nothing less. The question is, how do you arrive at the experience of that? Well, according to thinking, you arrive at that by perfecting yourself, by becoming a better and better role. And by overcoming the negative assessments you make of yourselves and the negative assessments that others make of you. And by cleansing yourself and purifying yourself of all of the awful things you've done, all of the shortcomings you have, all of the things that affected others negatively because you were not able to fulfill your role well. That's what you think. That's what you think. Pay attention to the words. But we talked last week about the fact that the way to become free of guilt is to stop thinking. We said that the way to get free of it, the way to get in touch with your guiltlessness, is to shift from body identification to mind identification. Simply shifting your focus of attention from one thing you consciously experience today to another thing you consciously experience today. Because each of you does experience mind, and each of you does experience body. To whatever degree any of you are bound to suffering, sorrow, sickness, sin, and death, it can be attributed to one thing only: thinking. Now, I don't just mean thinking, you're thinking. You think very specific things. You think, I am a body. I am immortal. I know that in the sweet by and by I will experience my immortality, but right now I'm a mortal in a mortal body. I'm subject to sickness and death. I'm subject to injury. I'm subject to distress others have with me. I'm subject to the strongest will around me. Or alternatively, arrogantly, I know that I have the capacity to be at least as strong as the strongest will around me, and it's my learning to learn how to stand up to the strongest will around me and be equal to it so that it's a draw. And there is balance, equality, and therefore no more war with that one. But the fact is that you can look back over the centuries and find that this line of thinking has not proven to be true. It hasn't brought peace. It hasn't brought invulnerability to injury, accident, sickness. The culprit is thinking. And that's why the answer lies in what we've referred to as the silence within you, which simply means the place where thinking isn't going on, where you're just being present, conscious awareness. You call it meditation. It's a specific practice. It's like a specific use of your mind, a unique and intermittent use of your mind, which, even used intermittently, can reduce your blood pressure and benefit you physically. Why does it do that? Because even intermittently, the conscious experience of silence, the silence within you, because it embodies the very nature and function of your being, your divine being, as the son or daughter of God that you are, it evidences itself as changed, what you would call physical experience, healing in one form or another. That's how valuable the silence is. That's how valuable not thinking is. Now, I wanted to make one point perfectly clear before we go into the book, and that is that even right now, you have not sinned against God, and in God's eyes you are not guilty, and you do not have to overcome His perception of you as being guilty before you can be let back into His presence or back into the kingdom of heaven. You do not have to atone to God for something God knows you could never do and therefore have never successfully accomplished. Because God does not see you guilty, God has no cause for punishing you. The very concept of punishment can't come into existence until guilt is established as a reality. And since guilt is not established in your Father's mind, there is no penalty due you, and no penalty you have to pay. You see, you're already paying a penalty by thinking. But it's not a penalty laid upon you by anything outside of you. It's just the experience one has when he or she attempts to do something that it's impossible to do. When you try to do the impossible, You're constantly faced with the impossibility of it. And the continued attempt to do what you can't do is not comfortable. That's all. Let's go into the book. When you have accepted the atonement for yourselves, what would that be? What would be the atonement that you would accept for yourselves? The atonement would be the acceptance of the awareness that you're not guilty. Together with the abandonment of that which caused you to seem to be guilty, which is thinking, reasoning, coming to conclusions, and treating yourself and others on the basis of conclusions arrived at as a result of thinking, which the Father did not give you the capacity to do. When you have accepted the atonement for yourselves, you will realize that there is no guilt in God's Son, either you or anyone else. And only as you look upon Him as guiltless can you understand His oneness. For the idea of guilt brings a belief in condemnation of one by another. You see, it takes two to have a difference of opinion, a difference of point of view that can amount to condemnation. Only as you look upon him, your brother, as guiltless, can you understand his oneness. For the idea of guilt brings a belief in condemnation of one by another, projecting separation in place of unity. Or we could say imagining separation in place of unity. Now this next sentence is very important. You can condemn only yourself. Let's stop right there. You can condemn only yourself. You can, with great skill, invite other people, others, to condemn themselves. But they have to engage in the condemnation. They have to agree with you. And others can invite you to condemn yourself, but only you can condemn yourself. You can condemn only yourself. And by so doing, you cannot know that you are God's Son. How do you condemn yourself? By thinking. In the silence in you, it is impossible to condemn yourself. In the silence and the peace of the silence in you, as full conscious awareness, it is impossible for you to condemn. Well, you know the phrase, well, the devil made me do it. Or he made me do it. He's making me feel miserable. Let's be honest, he may be firmly, enthusiastically, and aggressively inviting you to condemn yourself and to believe that you are what he sees you are. But you have to take the bait. And you have to agree. And when you agree, you have engaged in condemning yourself.